You probably believe you're running your own software, right? Like you wake up, you set your goals, you decide your level of ambition for the day.
Right. The assumption is that you dictate your own habits.
Exactly. You
Well,
firmly believe your thoughts and actions originate entirely from within your own private consciousness. But what if that is just a complete biological illusion?
it's honestly a profoundly destabilizing idea to confront.
Yeah, because what if your nervous system is actually functioning a lot more like a Wi-Fi router? Like it's constantly pinging the room, scanning for the nearest network, and actively overriding your personal goals just to seamlessly synchronize with the people sitting next to you.
And that's exactly what we're looking at today. We walk around operating under this philosophical assumption of absolute free will, you know?
Right. We think we're standalone computers.
Yes, safely disconnected from the machines around us.
But biologically, you weren't just thinking, you were synchronizing. And the systems governing that synchronization are, frankly, completely invisible to your conscious mind, which is the exact tension we're going to pull apart in today's deep dive. We're looking at the biological and systemic realities of neural resonance based on some incredible source material, and we're mapping out exactly how our environments dictate our capacity to change.
Because if we really are just pinging Wi-Fi routers, that means our behavior is not fully self-generated.
No, not at all. It's continuously shaped, stabilized, and really constrained by the social network you happen to be logged into at any given moment.
And I think we really have to approach this purely as an analytical deconstruction. I mean, there's no room here for those empty motivational platitudes.
Oh, like surround yourself with winners or protect your energy.
Right, exactly. We need to strip away the mysticism entirely and look strictly at the mechanism.
So to understand why your environment has such an absolute grip on your behavior, where do we even start?
We have to completely dismantle our assumptions about what the brain's primary job actually is. We have to move away from the philosophical idea of the self and look at the hard biological reality of predictive processing.
Okay, so if the brain's main job isn't, generating my unique personality or helping me self-actualize, what is it actually doing all day?
Fundamentally, your brain is a prediction engine.
A prediction engine.
Yeah. Its primary objective is not to find absolute truth. And it certainly isn't designed to make you the most successful, productive version of yourself.
Wait, really? It doesn't care about my goals?
Not in the way you think. Its core biological imperative is reducing uncertainty. That's how an organism survives. It models and predicts its environment so it can navigate that environment safely.
And with the least amount of energy expended, I'm assuming?
Precisely. It wants to know what's going to happen next so it doesn't get eaten, sure, but mostly so it doesn't waste precious metabolic resources reacting to surprises.
So it wants to anticipate. It demands anticipation.
Exactly. In neurobiology, there's this concept called allostasis. It's the idea that the brain is constantly trying to anticipate the body's needs before they arise to maintain stability.
Okay, but when you apply that to the human environment, you run into a pretty massive problem, don't you?
You do, because you have to ask yourself, what is the most complex, chaotic, and highly unpredictable variable you interact with every single day?
I mean, it's got to be other people. There is nothing more unpredictable than another human being.
Exactly. Other humans are massively complex variables. They have their own motivations, moods, potential for sudden aggression or withdrawal.
Right.
Because of that immense unpredictability, your brain is forced to allocate just an enormous amount of its cognitive resources to modeling them.
Modeling them, predicting them, and ultimately aligning with them.
Yes. Alignment is the absolute key to predictability.
Because if I'm aligned with you, like if we're moving at the same speed and operating under the same emotional frequency, I can predict you.
And if I can predict you, my brain doesn't have to burn extra glucose worrying about what you might do next.
Wow. Okay, this actually explains something I've always wondered about. Well, it's that immediate physical shift you feel when you enter certain environments. Like, you can be in a fantastic mood, totally relaxed, and you walk into a room where everyone is tense.
Right.
You haven't spoken to anyone, nobody has yelled at you, but within minutes, your chest gets tight, your breathing changes, and you literally feel tense too.
Yeah, so what you're describing is often categorized as emotional contagion. But we need to look at the mechanism behind it. Emotions are just abstract feelings.
What are they then?
They're preparatory states for biological action. If the group is anxious, their nervous systems are preparing for a threat.
Ah, so it's highly adaptive, evolutionarily speaking, for my brain to instantly adopt that same preparatory state.
Precisely. If the tribe is preparing to run from a predator, Your brain doesn't want to wait around to verify the threat. It just syncs the emotions so your legs are ready to run too.
So it's a survival mechanism. It's not an empathy mechanism.
Empathy is a byproduct, yeah, but survival is the driver. And it goes way beyond just emotions. We see this in behavioral mirroring all the time.
Like posture and body language.
Right. You're sitting across from someone, they cross their arms, and 90 seconds later, your nervous system initiates the exact same posture.
And you don't consciously decide to do it at all.
Never. Your brain does it as a foundational physical step to establish a shared baseline. It's signaling to the other person, I am like you, I am safe, we are aligned.
Okay, but there's a third layer to this alignment, right? And the source material points out that this one is perhaps the most insidious when it comes to personal development.
Yes, expectation calibration.
Because the brain doesn't just mirror posture or copy a mood, it actually redefines what constitutes normal or acceptable behavior.
Exactly. And it bases that entirely on the specific group of people in the room. This is where we shift from just momentary physical mirroring to long-term behavioral shaping.
So my brain doesn't have an objective standard for what working hard looks like.
No, it does not possess an objective universal standard for what constitutes hard work. It doesn't have a fixed parameter for appropriate emotional expression.
It just scrapes the data from the local network.
It calibrates those standards constantly based on the people around you. But I think we need to be really careful here not to reduce this to just mirror neurons.
Yeah, popular science loved talking about mirror neurons for a decade. It made it sound like we just have a few specific cells responsible for copying people.
Right, which was a massive oversimplification. Yes, there are neural pathways involved in mirroring motor actions, but expectation calibration involves the prefrontal cortex, the reward circuitry, and these deeply ingrained social reinforcement loops.
It's a system-wide architecture.
Exactly. The brain is continuously running sophisticated simulations of how the group will react to a potential behavior, and it adjusts the behavior before you even initiate it.
Just to ensure a frictionless interaction.
Just to avoid friction, yes.
But if we pause here, there's a massive logical question that comes up.
Okay.
I have my own goals, like I want to start a business or get in shape or learn a language. Why does my brain care so much about matching the group's expectations that it would actively sabotage my own conscious goals?
It comes down to the fundamental thermodynamics of biological efficiency.
Thermodynamic.
Yes. We really have to stop looking at human behavior through a moral or purely psychological lens and start looking at it through a metabolic lens. Deviation from the group norm requires massive amounts of energy.
Explain that mechanism for me. Why does deviation cost energy?
Well, imagine you're in a group where the standard is to be cynical and passive, and you decide you're going to be optimistic and highly proactive.
Right.
To maintain that deviation, you have to consciously monitor your behavior. You have to actively suppress the urge to join in their complaints.
So my prefrontal cortex is basically burning glucose to maintain that top-down control.
Exactly. And then you have to manage the social friction you cause. You have to process their micro-expressions of disapproval, their passive-aggressive comments, or even outright rejection.
And processing that social friction takes a toll.
Processing social friction actually activates the same neural pathways as processing physical pain. It is incredibly cognitively exhausting.
So if the brain's main job is just saving energy and reducing uncertainty, fighting the current of the group isn't just socially awkward.
No, it is literally triggering an energy crisis in the brain. Alignment, on the other hand, reduces friction. It's metabolically cheap.
So when you align, you can operate on autopilot. The brain defaults to alignment purely for efficiency.
Yes. It realizes that constantly fighting the localized gravitational field of your social environment is burning too much fuel, so it syncs up to save energy.
This fundamentally changes how we view something as common as peer pressure, doesn't it? We completely romanticize it.
We do. We apply these dramatic narratives like, oh, I gave in to peer pressure because I desperately want to be liked and accepted.
But the deeper structural truth is just that your brain realized fighting the room was an inefficient use of calories.
Exactly. It's not a moral failing, it's a thermodynamic surrender.
A thermodynamic surrender.
Wow. Okay, so once we establish that the individual brain defaults to alignment to save energy, we have to scale that up.
Right. What happens when you put 5 or 10 or 50 of these prediction engines in the same space over a long period of time?
They all begin interacting.
Yeah. It's friction by predicting and aligning with everyone else.
It's like a room full of metronomes that eventually just sync up to the exact same rhythm.
That's a perfect analogy. The constant subtle adjustments back and forth lead to what we call behavioral convergence.
And the inevitable result of that convergence is the creation of an invisible baseline.
Yes, the group unconsciously negotiates a silent treaty on what is normal. They create deeply entrenched, shared norms regarding effort, emotional bandwidth, and ambition.
And no one ever says it out loud. Nobody writes on a whiteboard, "We will only operate at 40% capacity here." No. But everyone feels it. They feel the parameters of the gravitational field. And over time, individuals within that shared environment will inevitably drift toward this common baseline.
Because failing to do so carries that harsh deviation tax we discussed. The social friction, the cognitive load, the emotional discomfort.
Precisely.
But let me push back on the direction of that drift, though. Logically, if you have a group of 5 people and one person is objectively improving themselves, like they're working harder, communicating with more clarity, operating with higher discipline, shouldn't the group naturally want to elevate to match them?
You'd think so, right?
Yeah, shouldn't the gravitational pull of the room tilt upward?
It is a totally rational assumption, but it fundamentally misunderstands what a biological system prioritizes.
Which is?
The system does not prioritize progress. The system prioritizes stability.
Stability over progress, even if the progress is objectively good for everyone.
Always. Upward deviation is still deviation. It's still a destabilizing threat to the group's equilibrium.
Because if one person rapidly improves, they alter the dynamics.
Right. They introduce unpredictability.
Yeah.
They might demand more from the rest of the group, which creates cognitive load for everyone else. They might even leave the group entirely.
And evolutionarily speaking, a fractured tribe was a dead tribe.
Exactly. The system must protect its cohesion at all costs.
So the group's collective nervous system treats your self-improvement not as an inspiration, but as an anomaly, as a threat that needs to be neutralized and brought back to the baseline.
Yes. The gravitational field defines the precise parameters of acceptable ambition, acceptable discipline, and acceptable emotional expression. Anything outside that narrow range feels deeply unnatural to the group.
So if you start waking up at 5 a.m. to work on a startup while your friends are sleeping in, you are actively creating friction.
You are forcing their brains to update their models of who you are, which burns their glucose. So they will exert a gravitational pull.
Through teasing or guilt or subtle exclusion.
Right, to bring you back to the baseline. Not because they're bad people, but because their nervous systems are defending the stability of the environment.
Okay, let's make this visceral. We need to look at exactly how this invisible baseline, this deviation tax, actually plays out in everyday life.
Yeah, mapping the invisible mechanisms to observable behaviors is crucial, because this is happening to everyone listening right now, in one form or another.
The source material gives 3 specific real-world manifestations of this drift, and walking through them reveals just how quiet and relentless this process is.
Let's look at the first scenario, fitness and discipline drift.
Right. Let's take a highly disciplined individual. This is someone who works out intensely 5 days a week, their nutrition is totally dialed in, and they have incredibly high physical standards for themselves.
Now, place that person into a predominantly sedentary social group, a group whose baseline is low physical effort and high comfort.
The transition doesn't happen overnight, does it?
No. And what is most fascinating is that the disciplined individual rarely, if ever, makes a conscious, explicit decision to abandon their routine.
They don't wake up one Tuesday and say, I have decided to become unhealthy and stop caring.
Never. It's a slow decay. The workouts just slowly become inconsistent, the food standards gradually decline.
And prolonged rest, which previously would have made this person feel sluggish and irritable, suddenly becomes normalized. It feels acceptable.
Let's break down the exact mechanism of that decay. Imagine the microscopic moments of friction. The disciplined person says, I can't go to the bar on Friday night, I have a heavy training session early Saturday.
In that exact moment, they're introducing an anomaly into the group's baseline.
And the group reacts. It might not be hostile, it might just be mild disappointment, like, come on, just one drink, you work too hard, live a little.
But that subtle reaction requires the disciplined person to defend their choice. Their prefrontal cortex has to engage. They have to manage the slight awkwardness.
Right. And over weeks and months of these micro-interactions, the individual's brain begins to calculate the metabolic and social cost of that recurring friction.
It's running a cost-benefit analysis in the background.
Yes. And the brain eventually realizes that skipping the Saturday run and joining the group at the bar requires absolute zero social energy. It is a frictionless choice.
So the baseline simply shifts.
The prediction engine recalibrates the internal standard to make skipping the workout the expected, biologically efficient norm.
So the individual hasn't lost their moral character. Their Wi-Fi router simply synced to a network where the default setting is sedentary.
Exactly.
That brings us to the second manifestation, which I think is even more prevalent, and that is ambition and execution decay.
Oh, absolutely.
You introduce a high-agency goal or a highly proactive person into a low-execution environment, and the urgency just dissolves.
This is the defining characteristic of many large bureaucratic or corporate settings. You have an individual with a high drive to execute, placed into a system that heavily values deliberation, process, and safety over action.
I have lived this. I was in a corporate environment where we would literally spend weeks planning to plan.
Yes.
We would have a pre-meeting to discuss the agenda for the actual meeting, where we would discuss a project that was still 6 months out.
And if someone, usually a new hire who hadn't synced to the baseline yet, suggested, why don't we just build a rough prototype this afternoon and see if the idea even works?
You could feel the oxygen leave the room.
Because executing the idea disrupts the comfortable equilibrium. Actually building a prototype forces reality into the room. It introduces the possibility of immediate failure, which creates unpredictability.
And the system hates unpredictability. I used to sit in those meetings and think everyone was just lazy. But they weren't lazy.
No.
They're highly engaged in the act of not doing anything. The environment was actively defending its baseline. Planning safely replaces action.
The ideas circulate endlessly in these loops without ever hitting implementation. The environment acts as a hard, impenetrable ceiling for action.
That corporate boardroom is a perfect microenvironment of neural resonance, isn't it?
It is. The individual who wanted to build the prototype experienced the blunt force of the invisible ceiling. When they made the suggestion, the room tensed up. The group subtly labeled them as reckless, or not a team player, or disruptive.
And over time, what happens to that proactive person?
Their brain, seeking to reduce that continuous social friction and cognitive load, stops suggesting immediate action. They learn that the path of least resistance is to nod, take notes, and agree to schedule another meeting.
They synchronize to the walking pace of the room.
The ambition decays, not because the person suddenly lost their internal drive or forgot how to work hard, but because the environment could not biologically sustain that high frequency of execution without shattering its own stability.
It is terrifying to think about how many brilliant ideas are suffocated purely because the room's baseline couldn't handle the friction of execution.
It really is.
Now, the third scenario deals with emotional normalization. We've talked about physical discipline and professional ambition, but this gets into the psychological reality of families and close relationships.
This happens profoundly in groups that inherently avoid conflict. If a family or a friend group's baseline is emotional suppression, then direct communication is not viewed as healthy.
It's perceived as an aggressive act.
Yes.
I can instantly picture the family dynamic. The unspoken rule is that we do not discuss uncomfortable truths. We maintain a superficial harmony at all costs.
Right.
And if you are the one person in that family who tries to address the elephant in the room, if you say, hey, we need to talk about what happened, you aren't thanked for your honesty.
No, you become the problem. You are accused of ruining a perfectly nice holiday dinner.
Because the system prioritizes stability over truth, discomfort is actively suppressed, and stagnation, the refusal to heal or address toxic dynamics, is systematically reframed by the group as harmony.
And what happens to the individual who prefers direct, honest communication?
Over time, they learn to swallow their words.
They calibrate their emotional expression to match the muted, repressed frequency of the group. If they don't, the continuous social friction of being the problem child or the instigator will exhaust them.
Their nervous system adapts to the suppression just to survive the environment without constant physiological stress.
Exactly. Now, recognizing these specific behaviors, the subtle fitness drift, the boardroom ambition decay, the family emotional suppression is just the first step.
Right, but it leads to a much larger system-level realization. And this is where we have to confront why our attempts to break out of these bad habits usually fail entirely.
This brings us to what we can call the myth of discipline. When an individual finds themselves in that state of fitness drift or ambition decay, what is their immediate default diagnosis of the problem?
They turn inward. They blame themselves. They look in the mirror and think, I am lazy. I lack willpower. I don't want it badly enough. I need more discipline.
Precisely. They view the failure as a deep moral or psychological deficit within themselves. But the reality of neural resonance reveals that the issue is almost entirely structural, not moral.
The concept of discipline, as it's popularly sold of us in the self-help industry, is fundamentally flawed because it assumes the individual is operating in a vacuum.
It's the standalone computer illusion again. We think if we just update our own internal software, the output will change, ignoring the fact that we are still plugged into the exact same restrictive network.
So the fatal trap of internal change is that people attempt to create massive behavioral shifts while remaining entirely embedded in the exact system that continuously reinforces their current state.
They try to change the organism without changing the petri dish.
Let's break down how this trap actually functions, because the source describes it as a self-sealing feedback loop.
Yes, there are 3 stages to this loop, and it is crucial to see how they lock together. Stage 1. The environment reinforces a specific behavior. Let's go back to the low-execution corporate job.
Okay, so the environment rewards you for keeping your head down, avoiding risks, and just attending the meetings. It punishes you for moving too fast.
Stage 2. That reinforced behavior, over time, begins to shape your identity, because your brain is constantly observing your own actions to figure out who you are.
Wow, okay.
If you spend 3 years acting cautious and bureaucratic because the environment demands it, your brain updates its model of your identity. You stop seeing yourself as a fast-moving innovator, and you start believing, I guess I am just a conscious, deliberate planner.
So your identity morphs to justify the behavior that the environment forced onto you.
Exactly. And then stage 3, the final seal on the loop. That newly formed identity actively selects similar environments in the future.
Because you now believe you are a cautious planner, you feel psychologically secure in slow-moving bureaucratic structures.
Right. So when you eventually look for a new job, you unconsciously gravitate towards similar companies with the exact same low execution baseline, because that is where your prediction engine feels most stable and competent. The loop is perfectly closed.
The environment shaped the behavior shaped the identity. And the identity seeks out the environment. It's a closed thermodynamic loop.
And the core insight here, the distinction that completely redefines this struggle, is this. People are not stuck, they are stabilized.
Stabilized. The difference between those two words is huge. Being stuck implies an accident. It implies you are trapped against your will, like a car stuck in a muddy ditch, spinning its tires but unable to move. It suggests the system is broken.
But being stabilized means the system is working perfectly. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do, hold you firmly in place, perfectly balanced within the gravitational field of your surroundings.
If you are stuck, the logical solution is to just apply more force, rev the engine harder.
But if you are stabilized, applying more force is futile. The system has dampening mechanisms built in. It will simply absorb your extra energy, create more friction, and actively push back to maintain the equilibrium.
I want to use an analogy here to really make this physical.
Go for it.
We treat self-improvement like upgrading our car's engine. We read the books, we listen to the deep dives, we do the morning routines, and we conceptually upgrade ourselves from a little 4-cylinder engine to a massive supercharged V8 engine. We are fueled up and ready to go fast.
But where are you driving?
Exactly. We have this V8 engine, but we are still driving in bumper-to-bumper traffic where the speed limit is rigidly set at 10 miles per hour by all the other cars packed in around us.
Right.
The engine isn't the problem. You can rev that V8 all you want, you can burn all that high-octane fuel, but you are still only going 10 miles an hour because the car in front of you is going 10 miles an hour.
That is an exceptionally accurate physical representation of the biological reality.
Yeah.
What happens when you continuously rev a V8 engine while riding the brakes in 10-mile-per-hour traffic?
The engine overheats, you burn massive amounts of fuel for zero forward progress. You damage the machine, and you experience immense, exhausting frustration.
That overheating is burnout. That is exactly what it feels like to apply pure willpower to force behavioral change in an environment that is actively stabilized against that change. You burn out. You exhaust your prefrontal cortex.
Not because you are weak, not because you lack discipline.
No, but because you are fighting a localized gravitational field. The road is the problem, not the engine.
Now, if a physical room of 5 people, like a family dinner or a corporate meeting, if that small localized field can stabilize you this intensely and overheat your engine, We have to look at what happens when this mechanism scales globally.
Right.
Because we're no longer just influenced by the physical rooms we sit in. We have to examine modern amplification.
Historically, the human prediction engine was calibrated to a very small physical circle. You were influenced by your immediate tribe or village, perhaps a few dozen people. That was the extent of your baseline.
But today, through our screens, we are constantly, relentlessly exposed to streams of behavior from thousands, if not millions, of people every single day. The Wi-Fi router isn't just pinging the room, it is pinging the entire globe.
And we must critically analyze the predominant nature of the behavior we are passively consuming on those digital networks.
It's overwhelmingly passive. It is normalized distraction. It's people doing 15-second dances, or strangers complaining about minor inconveniences, or just generally engaging in highly fragmented, low-effort cognitive patterns.
This creates what we can call the global digital baseline.
Right.
We are talking about an unprecedented scale of neural synchronization.
Right.
If your brain is constantly pulling in data from digital environments where reduced attention spans, reduced depth of thought, and reduced physical execution are the statistical norm, your brain will inevitably begin to calibrate to that norm.
This completely reframes the scrolling trap for me. When I lose an hour doom scrolling on social media, I usually beat myself up for having a bad habit or lacking focus.
Sure.
But biologically, my brain isn't malfunctioning. It is successfully and efficiently synchronizing to a global baseline of low effort.
Yes, your brain is doing exactly what millions of years of evolution designed it to do. It observes the digital room, it identifies the baseline behavior, which is fragmented attention and passive consumption, and it seamlessly aligns your cognitive state to match it, to save energy.
The brain does this not because it is weak or broken, but because it is remarkably, ruthlessly efficient at matching the prevailing environment.
That is deeply unsettling, honestly. Because if I am trying to do deep, focused work, say I need to write a complex proposal or study for a difficult exam, but my brain has spent the last 3 hours unconsciously syncing to a digital environment that values 5-second attention spans, I am fundamentally at war with my own nervous system.
You are trying to sprint while your brain is actively pulling the emergency brake because the massive digital tribe it just observed is sitting perfectly still, staring at screens.
The friction is internal, but it is generated by external exposure.
Understanding the sheer scale of this stabilization, both in our physical rooms and our digital feeds, requires a complete paradigm shift in how we approach any kind of personal transformation. Knowing this, we can't just try harder.
Which brings us to the reframe. This is the perspective shift that allows for actual change. And it must be stated with absolute clarity.
If you are listening to this and you have been struggling to break a habit or start a project or change your physical health, hear this clearly. You are not failing to change.
You are being stabilized by the systems you participate in. Your current behavior, no matter how frustrating it is to you consciously, makes perfect logical sense within your current environment.
Let that settle. Your current behavior is a highly logical, biologically efficient adaptation to the specific inputs, feedback loops, and baselines of the people and digital spaces you spend time with.
This introduces the absolute necessity of the reference system. Lasting change cannot rely exclusively on internal effort. You cannot just rev the engine. True change inherently requires altering your reference points, your behavioral norms, and your environmental feedback loops.
Because without altering the environment, any attempt at internal change is treated by the existing system as a biological and social error to be corrected.
That is such a powerful way to look at it. If I try to force a new, highly disciplined habit without changing the people or the inputs around me, I am essentially acting as a software bug. I am a glitch in the matrix of my environment, and the environment is actively going to try to patch me out.
It operates exactly like an immune response. The system detects a deviation, your sudden burst of ambition or discipline, and it perceives it as a pathogen threatening the stability of the organism.
It deploys social friction, guilt, and cognitive load as antibodies to fix you, to neutralize the threat and bring you back within the acceptable parameters. Your self-improvement is the pathogen, and the group's baseline is the immune system.
Okay, so if we accept this reality, knowing that sheer willpower is a myth, that we are prediction engines constantly syncing to our environment to save calories, that we are being stabilized by self-sealing loops, and that the system will treat our growth as a biological bug to be patched out, how do we actually escape?
Right. How do we systematically and precisely recalibrate our environments without resorting to chaotic, impulsive life changes? I don't want the takeaway here to be quit your job, divorce your spouse, and move to a cabin in the woods.
And it shouldn't be. That kind of dramatic, chaotic rejection is just another form of instability. We need grounded, analytical guidance. There are 3 structural, non-motivational steps to alter your reference system with precision.
Step 1. Identify the baseline.
This requires you to step back and become an anthropologist of your own life. Pure, detached observation. You must look at the environments you spend the most time in: your office, your living room, your primary group texts, and identify what behaviors are actually normalized. And you must ask specific, targeted questions.
For example, how do the people around you handle discomfort? When things get difficult, do they lean into it and solve the problem? Or do they immediately seek distraction and complain?
What level of effort is considered typical? If someone works late to ensure a project is excellent, is that celebrated by the group, or is it mocked as try-hard behavior? What does this specific room consider too much?
You are mapping the invisible boundaries of the gravitational field. You aren't doing this to judge your friends or feel superior to your coworkers. You are simply calculating the baseline frequency of the room, so you know exactly what your brain is syncing to.
Once you have objectively mapped the room, you move to the second step: detect convergence.
This is where you have to turn the lens inward, which can be uncomfortable. Now that you know the baseline of the environment, you have to notice where your own behavior has drifted to match it.
Where have your personal standards quietly reduced? Where have you delayed taking action because the group inherently avoids action? Where are you suppressing your true opinions to maintain the group's artificial harmony?
And here is the most crucial instruction for the listener. You must view this drift not as a personal failure, but as a biological adaptation.
Do not shame yourself for it. You aren't weak. Your Wi-Fi router just did what it was designed to do. It synced to the local network to save you energy.
That lack of judgment is essential for the process. If you shame yourself for converging with the group, you generate negative emotion, which creates more cognitive load, which drains your energy further. If you view it simply as an automatic biological process, a mechanism of your prediction engine, you retain the clarity and agency to adjust the system.
Which leads us to the final actionable phase: adjust exposure. Intentionally introduce environments where the baseline naturally aligns with your intended direction.
You must seek out spaces where the behavior you want is simply the default,
Right.
where execution is normal, where deep, nuanced conversations are expected rather than avoided. You must find individuals who operate at a different, higher standard.
But there is a massive warning here that we need to highlight. The goal is not to seek out exhausting intensity. The goal is recalibration.
This is exactly where most people fail when they finally realize they need to change their environment. They look at their current group, realize it is too passive, and in a panic, they go find the most hyper-intense, aggressive, burnout-inducing group they can possibly find.
They go from a group that never works out to joining a group of elite ultramarathoners.
Yes, and that is just substituting one extreme stabilization for another. The friction between their current capacity and the new group's baseline will be far too high. The deviation tax will be too expensive, their prefrontal cortex will exhaust itself trying to keep up, and they will fail.
So the goal isn't to find an environment that forces me to sprint until I collapse. The goal is to find an environment where my absolute maximum sprint, the thing that takes all my willpower right now, is just everyone else's comfortable walking pace.
That is the precise structural shift. When you enter a room where your desired sprint is simply the established, unquestioned baseline, the walking pace, your brain no longer has to fight to maintain the new behavior. It doesn't have to burn extra glucose to override the group. It simply synchronizes to the new normal. The neural resonance finally works in your favor.
What previously required immense, exhausting discipline now requires almost no effort at all, because it is the path of least resistance in that specific room.
That is the ultimate architectural hack of the human nervous system. You use the brain's own biological desire for lazy alignment to pull you upward.
Let's crystallize exactly what this means for your ability to manifest real change going forward. We started this deep dive by challenging the foundational idea that you are a standalone computer, isolated from the people around you.
We have mapped out exactly how you are constantly pinging and synchronizing with the physical and digital spaces you occupy. We've shown how the brain, operating as a prediction engine, seeks to reduce uncertainty and save metabolic energy by aligning with the group, leading to inevitable behavioral convergence.
We saw how that convergence creates those invisible baselines that dictate our fitness, our ambition, and our emotional reality. And we dismantled the myth of internal discipline, revealing that we aren't stuck. We are stabilized by self-sealing feedback loops that punish deviation.
Ultimately, the core realization of this entire analysis is that change is fundamentally a matter of alignment, not just will. When the surrounding system changes, your behavior follows with significantly less resistance.
Until then, your current system will quietly, efficiently, and relentlessly pull you back to where it is most stable.
It is the biological reality of the human animal.
So we want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over, a highly analytical question that builds on everything we've unpacked today.
Consider the implications of your brain's architecture.
If your nervous system is literally designed to seamlessly adopt the standards of the room you are in, what if the most intellectually rigorous act of self-improvement isn't forcing yourself to change? What if it is conducting a ruthless audit of exactly who and what you are allowing your brain to silently synchronize with today? The Wi-Fi router is always on. The only question is, what network are you logging into?